Hello students, welcome to EPG Patsala. I am Dr. Nirmal Kumar Swai, Associate Professor, Department of Library and Information Science, Maharishi Dayananda University, Rohtak. Today we are going to discuss about a module, Collection Development Policy and Procedure, under the paper Special and Research Libraries. My mentor is Professor I.V. Malan, Central University of Himachal Pradesh. Well friends, begin with learning objectives. The learning objectives of the module are as follows. What is a collection? Why collection is important? Defining collection development policy, defining collection development policy document. After all, why a policy should be there, and the elements of collection development policy. What are the criteria of selections of the collections, including all kinds of collections, books, journals or periodicals, and electronic resources, and the tools also to be used. In this module, we will go or discuss collection development policy and procedure. Two broad aspects are to be discussed. One is collection development policy, and second is the procedure, how to design a collection development policy. Dear friends, before that, I would like to add a background aspect on collection development so that it would be easier to understand about the policy and the procedures to make it. First, collection development. Collections are core or the primary assets of a special or research library. A library is considered good only when its collections match to the satisfaction of its users or clients. At the same time, development of collection is not an overnight business, rather a continuous process. Building collection engages people, both the library professionals, the users, the availability of resources, the cost, the selection process, and currency in its use. While taking a break, I would like to say a little about collection. By and large, refer to books, journal, and other printed and non-printed materials. In the present context, collections have a wider connotations, largely including electronic or digital form. Collections, collection time was there in traditional form. Collection used to be the books and journals only, and a wider range of publications are coming in to the library collections. So maintaining collections and making them getting ready with those materials for the users is very difficult. So for that, what kind of collections should be built up in a library? At the same time, library is to be considered both as a physical space, at the same time a service organization. Why physical space has a meaning here? Suppose without considering irrationally, if we buy, purchase books and other materials, the library will be a dumping ground. So in this sense, selected materials, which is very much pertinent to the users, should be brought into the library. At the same time, its availability, different forms and formats, accessible through different vendors, and quick to through, I mean, to access those literatures by the users has put the library professionals in a doldrum. Equally, two divisions in terms of its access, free literature, paid literature, again has become a concern for library professionals. Two, three things I have mentioned here. Probably when we say library, we are not talking of the traditional library where only the materials or the collections are in the print forms. By and large, print forms are being replaced. Digital collections are being procured largely in the libraries, especially research and special libraries. So the users say, we want immediate access to the pertinent literature related to our field, especially in science and technologies. So forms and formats of access is an important issue. Like I have mentioned, the library collections, and we should purchase those materials, including books, journals, which is very much required, I mean, by the users, fitting into their expectations. So, how to deal all these issues? What kind of materials to be purchased? Randomly, if you go so emotionally, whimsically, and our budget will be lost, and we cannot buy the required materials. Collections will be won't be good for futures. For the future users, so that these issues can be probably addressed through certain guidelines to the extent in a format and a written form, which technically called a collection development policy. In next part of this module, we will discuss what the collection development policy is, its elements, and what are things to be described in that policy, along with the procedure how to develop a written policy. I have just talked about a policy. Policy is very much required because it is a formal document, and any activities regarding collection development will be guided by that document. If you don't have that, not properly written, then probably whimsically the things will be, especially the collection will be brought to the library, and it will be kind of a trash, nobody will use. And so before that, it comes to our mind what a policy is. In defining a policy, well, in a simplest form, policy is a rule or set of rules or kind of guidelines formally written by a person or a team of persons, approved by a higher authority, with the rules and sub-rules concerning all the issues related to collection development. It's a general kind of definition, probably. Many things are clear from this. These rules can be called with a formal name, like we have a book title. Example, Collection Development Policy, Vivekananda Library, Maharshi Dayananda University, 2016. So it's a name. So policy is a formal document, it's an authority. Nobody can go beyond that. Certain things are written, which kind of books, journals, or other materials are to be purchased, is written with rules, sub-rules, clauses, sub-clauses, so that the entire library collections will be guided by this. It won't be subjective rather if we follow a policy. That's why a policy should be there in each and every library. As I have mentioned, there will be certain rules which are broadly defined in main clause, and there will be many sub clauses like we have code books or legal documents in that. Similarly, as I mentioned, in a code book. In normal case, these rules are unchangeable but opens for interpretations, additions, and amendments in certain cases if it is required. Well, well, first and foremost thing comes to our mind: why a collection development policy at all? Sometimes without this also the library works. But the tragedy happens without a policy or a framework or a formal guidelines. It is realized in long run. Sometimes we go, we manage, we run the library without that. But what is the benefit of having this will be discussed in this module. Though there could be many reasons for a collection development policy, rather I would like to use regions with 4 broad headings subscribing to the IFLA guidelines. IFLA guidelines means IFLA designed 1980s a guidelines, a generalized guidelines, although it may not be fit to all kinds of libraries, to all nations, but still some formula of making collection development policy can be brought through. The first criteria, the first region could be selection of library materials. Selection is very important. We simply cannot casually consider this selecting library materials or buying or purchasing library materials randomly without any criteria. What does it happen? Because we have less cost, and this resource crunch has become a common phenomena in and among the libraries in India as well as in other parts of the globe also. So that's why as we have discussed above, library resources are primary to any library, so its procurement should be done very strategically except few cases. Sources pertaining to the particular subject is very large in the market, and some of them are useful to the clients of a library. How to choose those relevant materials is an imperative issue before the library professionals. Planning, why should we have collection development policy? There are many reasons as I have mentioned. So purchasing the relevant library materials is no easy headway. Budgetary limitations are always there, and constant problem. Increasing prices of the materials is based on a business attitude of the publishers is another concern. At the same time, study, teaching, and research is essential, which needs library resources including books and journals. So 2 things are there, because publisher is a business group. They publish, say, good books, journals, and other materials, and it is to be noted in the field of science and technology, the good publications the Indian scientists use is published by international publishers. Ironically, I don't know why Indian publishers are not coming up, say Elsevier, Springers, and many more. So they charge sometimes exorbitant. Our libraries don't cope to the price chart. At the same time, without reading those journals, especially journals of science and technology, our Indian science cannot go ahead, because research in science and technology is very much needed for a nation to grow. Say India is developing, aspiring many, and shown its good result in science and technology field, especially in space science, in many other fields. So that's why uh, the planning is very much needed. What kind of materials to be purchased? So handling these issues, especially developing a good collections in libraries, these issues may bring the authority into an emotional and subjective mode, which may lead to procuring redundant materials, filling the physical areas, consuming unnecessary manpower, and finally, with the end result is a zero. What does it mean? Again, referring back to the basic proposition, why should we have a formal written collection development policy? Unless we have, it is also observed in many cases, be it librarians, be it library staff, be it teachers communities in or the scientist communities in research and special libraries, or teachers of university libraries. What do they do? Sometimes budget is spent, you know, in a subjective mode. Maybe the librarian is biased, maybe a teacher is doing good work in university and may say, please go for this journal. And so that's why, suppose we buy those books or journals, where to keep all those? Because, so that's why, and the end result is zero. So demand of a formal rule book rather, is very much warranted here. So a formal rule described in a policy can make a smooth flow of materials with a high relevancy, with an affordable cost for the researcher. Because these days, we all library people and library and information science professionals, we are seriously under threat, and it's a continuous threat of finance crunch, budget cut. So that's why a formal policy can help us in buying suitable materials, suitable collections to the library. Another point I would like to highlight, especially those are not aware of library activities, the communities of library and information science professionals, for them, library, very well our S.R. Ranganathan, the father of library science in India, has said long years back, library is a growing organism. It's a big organization. Probably, many accreditation agencies have recognized also in India, in abroad. So, if it is a special or research library, if it is a university library, it should have a beautiful, good, big, and nice library system. And library is a basic for any development of any university. Or so that's why public relations dealing with large crowd of users. Sometimes in universities we have 10 to 15,000 students, and other communities also, they interact with us. So public relations are very much needed. And how to deal those public relations with the users, with the patrons, with the special users? So a formal kind of rules is very much needed to guide all these public relations. That's why. Another aspect I would like to highlight here, why should we have a policy, collection development policy, because in wider context, it is said in wider context. So many activities that, suppose a question is asked, suppose any dignitaries visited a university or a research center, or a vice chancellor visited other universities. If he or she, the vice chancellor has received a book gift from other universities, so where the book should be kept? So ultimately, book is kept because it is property of the university. So in wider context, that's I'm saying, if people give donations and and the agencies interact with the library, so there should be some kind of rules to deal with this. Otherwise, the library is a growing organization with extended activities, sometimes functions as a nodal center for its parent organization. In terms of donation from the dignitaries, participating agency, organ of a consortium, are all the modern activities of a library. By keeping in mind for future development, a collection development policy can be helpful in guiding and functioning of the library. Okay, theoretically speaking, having a collection development policy sounds very well, but unfortunately, many big and old universities don't have a proper formal collection development policy. The research libraries and the university libraries should have a properly defined with all kinds of nitbit of things regarding collections. So procedures for a collection development policy we are going to discuss. It's very difficult. The most crucial part of a collection policy is to follow a procedure or multiple procedures in terms of steps to go ahead and defining the policy elements. Here I would rather like to suggest that to follow some of the options in developing a collection development policy. The options are like this. For a new library, the authority, the library people, the librarian and the higher authorities of the parent organization may consult or follow the policy of neighboring institute of repute if it is a new library. Because, suddenly guided by the rules and regulations of making a library policy will be a problem, because following a policy document sometimes doesn't work, because in local and different context that may not work. So start following of nearby or neighboring institute, so that helps. In case of a research library, the policy is to be followed by the uniform policy of the central organization of which the library is. In this option, I would like to suggest, suppose there are numerous Indian agencies, especially in the field of science and technology. In case of social science also, we have ICAR, we have CSIR, we have ICSSR. So there are many institute functions under this umbrella term, say CSIR. They started calling CSIR labs also. So in that case, it is not to make, it's not possible, even feasible, not allowed probably, to have a different collection development policy. So it is guided or bound by the policy developed by the central agency. Third option is the library is already having a collection development policy in any form. If it is old or new or partially functioning or defunct, it needs to be amended in terms, in that case, don't go for a structural change in terms of it's to be amended or certain elements to be added in terms of factors which affect the library. Some of them have been discussed above also. Before designing a collection development policy, what could be the elements? Because after all, it is a formal document, certain guidelines will be there. So policy elements includes introduction first. So in introductory part, collection level policy should have a name like of a book. In the introductory part, the mission statement of the library, the purpose of the policy, and the audience to whom it is addressed should be there at the beginning. A general statement before moving, a specific aspect, that a general statement should be there. In this element, general aspect of the library is to be mentioned in terms of subject profiles, user profiles, collection profiles, and also funding profiles, which is very important. For the the brief statement about the user communities, the type of collection including the format, subjects, budgetary overview, and if any agreement with the agencies should be part of this general statement. Subject profiles, subject profile refers to that what are the subject under which the collection are procured, importance of the subject in terms of study, teaching and research, so that budgetary allocations can be done smoothly. We must have observed in special libraries, in research libraries, in university libraries, the budget allocation to a field of science and technology, to that in emerging areas, are different other than its social science counterpart. This should be kept in mind. In academic terms, books in science and technology in the emerging areas are in most cases published by Springer, Elsevier, and other foreign publishers with a high cost. So the budgetary allocation is relatively higher than its social science counterpart. Selection criteria is another important aspect. Through these criteria only we can build good collections to the library. Selection criteria is a stage of foolproof method by which only good and relevant materials get into the library. At the same time, in the policy, defined descriptions are highly recommended to the book selectors. There will be certain general methods. On the basis of these, the selection can be done. This is a generalized method specifically for books, periodicals, and other electronic resources. First is subject matter, second is potential use, third will be relating to the collection, fourth will be bibliographic consideration, and the last will be the cost. Selection criteria for books and periodicals or journals and the electronic content will be different. In case of selection of books, certain tools are very useful, which must be featured in the collection development policy document. One is book reviews. I'm talking about the tools, the recommended list, subject list, comprehensive resources. Sometimes publishers and online bookstores provide that, and weekend newspapers also, Saturday and Sunday book reviews are published. In periodicals also there is a specific review section, sometimes at the end of the periodical. And in case of periodicals, unlike your books, a little change in the criteria. So we must see the purpose, scope, and the audience of the periodicals, accuracy, sometimes local interest, sometimes back volumes, indexing, where is it is indexed, cost also, demand, its availability, and last very important probably in the Indian case, not only India, in other parts of the world also for the academics, the impact factor of the periodical. So for the tools of periodical selection is concerned, is a bit difficult, different from the books, but still there are selective guides, directories of periodicals and newspapers. Sometimes a publisher catalog also helps us in choosing good periodicals, periodical lists and citations. sometimes a citation also provide the quality of a periodical. Another aspect is very useful selection of electronic resources, subject coverage to be kept in mind, cost considerations, access and login aspect, technical support considerations, and of course the legal issues. Friends, in this collection development policy, the tools for selections is very important. In case of books, the tools are different. In case of periodicals or journals, it is again different. And another aspect in electronic resources, which is a growing demand of the users. In case these tools or periodicals, say, and electronic resources, trial versions is very important. Trial versions of the software, the electronics resources vendors. And sometimes, suppose we go after a single vendor, they may charge exorbitant, which is difficult, may be difficult for the libraries to purchase or to have MOU or agreement with that. So in that case, options are open, go for alternate vendors. Then alternate products. Alternate products in the sense, suppose instead of buying a particular journal or particular vendor, so we can go for similar kind of journal which is available with a little less cost. And review sources are there also, library journals, and there are online and databases. So these tools would be very useful. Evaluation method is, as we have discussed already in this library, is funded heavily these days. The soaring price rise of the journals, periodicals, books, and electronic resources is very difficult to cope. So whatever we have, whatever we provide through our service to the users or the clients, it should be evaluated. Collection evaluation method. After the procurement of the library materials, the collections are processed and ready for use. After sometimes months or years, it is found that some of the collections are never used in terms of nobody has issued the book. If the book is not used for a couple of years together, notably the book may not be useful. Book may be good or bad, we are not discussing here. So library people, the authority, take a decision like we will stop buying, or we will weed out the books from the library just to keep the space safe for its replacement. We just discussed weed out policy. So weed out policy should be part of main policy, which can be effectively weed the book out and the physical space is cleared for further replacement. This is very important. Weed out policy, as defined, weed out policy is required if a book is not used for a long period. That doesn't mean the book is not good, but it has a contextual value in that particular library. So decision to be taken. To students, we are coming closer to the end of this module with the short span of time. So if you summarize what have we learned, the first, the importance of collection, and collection development is not overnight business, it is a continuous process. And at the same time, by looking at the cost, usage and demand of the users, we should purchase the relevant materials, collections to the library, so that a proper guidelines or proper formally written guidelines is needed, what we technically called collection development policy, and also we discussed how to design or make a policy fruitful. So certain points we have discussed. Thank you.